Today, I'm very excited to have my co-host Michele Wucker here, and we're interviewing Peter Atwater about his new book, The Confidence Map. I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves, but in the meantime, I'm having some technical difficulties with making sure you can see the three of us. So please be patient while I try to fix that. So I presume nothing's changed, right, for the both of you in seeing the three of us. No, right? Guessed. Okay. All right. Shoot. That is too darn bad. Let's just see here. Peter, you can.
Yeah. I got something that suggests that you should tap the profile-shaped icon at the bottom of the screen.
The profile-shaped icon at the bottom of the screen. Let's see. Hi, Jasmine. I'm so glad you're here. The profile icon. I don't even see that. Jasmine, would you be willing to tell me what you see on the screen? I'm presuming you're just seeing Peter, which worst case scenario is not so bad because it's Peter that'll be answering the questions. I just wish Michele could be seen too. Do you know what that profile looks like, Peter? Because I'm just not. You see Peter. Okay. So for whatever reason, let's just see. It seems like Peter, you're showing up, and I'm not sure. Oh, let me try this.
Hey, I see Michele.
Okay, but I think it's just Michele, right? Now we don't probably see you. So it seemed I can't figure out how to have.
I just see myself now.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so
now I see Peter and me.
I'll just say hi. I'm here, but I'm going to put it on you, Peter, for now. But this is Michele Wucker. Michele, why don't you introduce yourself first, so our audience knows who you are, and then we'll start to ask Peter to also self-identify. So, Michele, you and I met, 3 years ago? 2 years ago?
2 years ago, I think. Yeah, we met. Well, I'm Michele Wucker. I coined the term gray rhino, which you may have heard. It's a metaphor for the big scary thing that's coming at you. And it's a challenge to be one of the people who deals with it instead of being trampled. I'm a strategic advisor. I work at the intersection of economic policy, business strategy, and behavioral science and decision making. And I've known Peter for considerably longer than I've known you, Kim, through the World Economic Roundtable, a group of really smart policy people in Wall Street in New York. And I talked with Peter when I was writing my book, You Are What You Risk, about the relationship between confidence and risk taking. And so I've got a bunch more questions for him about that today that we'll go into in just a couple minutes. But I will let the two of you introduce yourselves a little bit further. Although, Kim Ann, I guess you need no introduction.
Well, I'll just say that I am Kim Ann Curtin, the Wall Street Coach, and I have been just blown away by the books that Michele has written and the books that Peter's written. And I feel it has such a huge impact at just understanding where confidence comes from, how to navigate risk with regards to Michele's books. And I know these books have changed my life professionally and personally, and that's why I want to share them with all of you, because I feel that they both have this incredible ability to speak right to the heart of the matter without a lot of jargon. And that to me is very rare, especially when it comes to risk and confidence. So Peter, I have your bio, but I'm going to read it, but then of course you can add anything you want. Peter is the president of Financial Insights. He has a great story about when he turned 45, his son said, "Dad, you're halfway to 90. And 3 months later, Peter changed his whole life, and walked away from a successful career in financial services to do something different. different. And that something turned out to be studying confidence. Today, he teaches confidence-driven decision-making at William and Mary and honors students at the University of Delaware. And when he's not in the classroom, you can find him speaking on stage on Bloomberg Television and the Financial Times. Anything else that I should have said besides the fact that his new book, The Confidence Map, Charting a Path from Chaos to Clarity, is a must-read for anybody who's in finance, anybody who's trying to better themselves or navigate this crazy, crazy, volatile world we live in. Peter, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much, Kim Ann. And if you've not read Michelle's books, I really encourage you to. She is a brilliant mind and sees the world in a unique lens that I think is really powerful.
Agreed, 100%, 100%.
Thank you, guys.
You know, I am just kind of curious, if you are talking to a trader or an investor about the importance of confidence, perhaps it would be for them to read your book, but what else would you want them to, like, at a minimum, walk away with for themselves to understand the concept of confidence better?
Yeah, I think I would want them to appreciate that confidence requires both a sense of certainty and control. And one of the mistakes investors make over and over and over is they think that they know what's coming for sure. And that could be either really good things or really bad things, but they over imply a level of certainty to the future that ultimately is their undoing.
Do you feel that there is some sort of that perhaps they're afraid to make decisions unless they have this like unreasonably high amount of confidence?
Yeah, I think that what happens is that our level of confidence, our actions and our stories all exist in equilibrium. And the story component really gets in the way of good decision making, because to your point, if I'm not certain of what I should do, the story that I'm telling myself then drives that inactivity or the paralysis. And so I always caution people to remember that the story we tell ourselves isn't an accurate forecast so much as it is a reflection on how we feel. And if you can look at your stories objectively, they say an awful lot about your mood and where your head is that you don't appreciate. You're thinking that you're telling the truth and you're being really accurate in your sense of the future, when in fact the future is going to be what it's going to be. You've now just created this story that is comfortable in buttressing your decision making.
When you started to dive into the concept of the story making that happens, what was it? You have such a simple and profound map of confidence. Would you be willing to just walk us through that for those who are listening, to just because it's so graspable that I think it would be helpful for them to have context, those listening?
Sure. So I created a very simple 2x2 chart, and it has certainty on the x-axis and control on the y-axis and high and low levels of both of them. And if you think about it, when we have high levels of certainty and control, the upper right-hand box of this image, that's the comfort zone. That's where we feel relaxed. Things are easy. We're confident. We're nice to ourselves, to others. It's a place that we ultimately aspire to be in. The opposite corner, the lower left-hand corner, is what I call the stress center, where we don't have either certainty or control. And we feel powerless. We feel things are unpredictable. And we certainly saw the impact of those feelings during COVID. COVID put us in the very lower left-hand corner.
Yeah.
There are two other boxes. There's the passenger seat, which I think of as the lower right-hand corner, where we have certainty but no control. It's an airplane ride, an elevator. It's places and environments where we hope we have a high degree of certainty, but we have absolutely no control of the situation. And then the last box is what I call the launch pad, where we have control but no certainty. That's the upper left-hand box. And what we forget, Kim Ann, is that every one of our financial decisions, whether I'm borrowing money, lending, investing, all of those decisions are made in that launch pad box, that upper left-hand box. And so we have to be careful in that box because we're making choices without certainty, but we are painting this image of the future in the process that has a big bearing on what we do.
If I could actually just jump in here on the confidence quadrant, because as I was reading the book, I thought back to our earlier conversations, Peter, about how confidence and certainty affect how we perceive risks. And there's this big fallacy that risks are something that you can objectively measure and correct for if you need to. But this changing level of confidence and certainty, of course, affects how risky you believe something is or isn't, as well as how much risk you are willing to take on or not. And throughout the book, I see that you talk about risk taking in each of these four quadrants. So I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about that now for our audience. Is that what does risk taking look like in each of the four quadrants that you just described?
Sure. In the comfort zone, our willingness to take risk is incredibly high. We are naturally at ease. It's like we're driving on a straight road on a clear day. And so we're relaxed and we're not paying very close attention. It's the thing that I find fascinating with risk taking is the more confident we are, the less we scrutinize, the less we have to focus. If you think about driving and you've gotten somewhere and you sort of scratch your head, how did I get there? Well, you were in the comfort zone and you weren't paying attention. And we do the same thing in a lot of the driving, investing, and the like. So in the stress center in the lower left-hand corner, we are intensely focused. And one of the consequences of that is that we are so obsessed with the most immediate risk that we ignore all the other risks to our own peril. And this is particularly true if you think about our focus on geopolitical risk. If I'm having a heart attack, I am not paying any attention to things beyond my life. And so one of the consequences of low confidence is we are very likely to ignore abstract risks, risks that are far away in time and distance, and we fail to appreciate that they're still out there until often it's too late. And then we're like, oh my gosh, now I was so focused on this problem, I forgot about these other 18.
Did you have a follow-up there, Michele? Oh, shoot. Your sound just went by the wayside, Michele.
Oh, sorry.
You're back. You're back.
I'm back. Sorry. There was a siren going by, but yeah, I quote you all the time talking about the me here now risks versus the us everywhere forever. And how the one is a very narrow perception of risk. You only care about yourself, and the us everywhere forever is a much more interdependent view, and it's also a growth mindset. And I guess you might talk about that as, that's where you've got the most certainty and the most confidence. And ironically, that's where you need to be to get out of the less confident and less certain places. So there's a bit of a paradox there.
There is a paradox, and you do need to have that growth mindset to have a more expansive view. And a lot of that is that it pushes you to think in terms of the future rather than the present. And so you'll prepare, you'll plan, you'll be more strategic. And all of that helps to propel you up and to the right towards the comfort zone. The danger is that upper right-hand corner is almost magnetic, and it draws us to be paying so much attention to the future that we're ignoring the present. We're ignoring what's right in our backyard. I think of that in the context of supply chain management, where, if you think about our mindset before COVID, it was very much an us everywhere forever mindset where we could get whatever we wanted from anyone at any time. And what we missed was that we had very little in terms of support that was proximate to us. And the consequence was, we then ran to Costco and came home with pallets of water and wipes and all of this other stuff, because we needed those to be right here next to me.
Yeah.
And we see this over and over where, we're buying NFTs in one moment and then we're hoarding cash the next.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Why don't you just explain Me Here Now, because it is one of the most powerful parts of this book, The Confidence Map. Just describe how you came to that so those listening can just conceptualize. I feel so often, Peter, traders specifically are so frequently in the Me Here Now that blinds them to the market as a whole. That keeps them from their big picture thinking. And blindsided, let them get blindsided.
Yeah. So what I discovered was when our confidence is low, it changes our relationship with the world around us. The only thing that matters, if there's if I'm being attacked by a bear, the only thing that matters is myself right here, right now. And so I'm naturally focused on a very, very small world. And there's a cognitive element to this that we often overlook, which is I need things to be very black or white. So I cannot handle abstract thought. And so to think strategically, to think in a broad, creative way is impossible. I need things, it's either very black or very white, because ambiguity represents a risk that I'm not willing to take when my confidence is very low. Either the bear is there or the bear isn't there. I don't want to worry, might the bear be there? Yeah. And that Me Here Now, very concrete mindset is what we see anytime there's a crisis. The cause doesn't matter, but the response is always the same. In our own lives, in the lives of businesses, in the lives of policymakers. I mean, if you look at the decision making that was made at the depths of despair during March of 2020, during COVID, every one of those choices was about Me Here Now. Nobody was thinking about tomorrow or the longer term consequences of the choices they made, which is why we had this massive inflation. Yeah. If you cut supply and you pour money into the system, that's going to be the consequence. But nobody was thinking in those terms. It was, the focus was on March 2020, and that was it.
What would be your advice to traders and investors and average everyday people who are in the middle of what we're all in right now? We're recording this on November 1st, 2023. So what would your advice, based on this, the importance of having the confidence map, applying that to the uncertainty we're all in, all that sense of not being able to control certain variables. How do you cope with what we are currently in, emotionally, personally, professionally, and how do you advocate others cope?
So the first thing to remember is that the world was, is, and will always be uncertain. And so when you're talking about the uncertainty of today, what you're revealing, Kim Ann, is that we are not confident. That you never hear about uncertainty when we're confident.
Yeah.
And the fact that and so when that word is just everywhere, is saying we are not confident today.
Yeah.
So we have to be careful not to fall victim to it and to be too cautious.
So
because
powerful.
that's going to be our natural response.
Yeah.
And we see that in terms of all of the money flowing into money market funds today.
Yeah.
We talk about a me here now investment. And so the danger is that everyone retreats into that me here now mode and drags the market down with them.
Yep. Yep.
And should that happen, it then becomes laughable to invest in things that have a long-term time frame to them. And yet that's precisely what we should do in the midst of a panic. I always joke that panic is God's way of telling us the worst is behind us, not ahead of us.
And if I remember, Peter, I think you and I emailed during the early days of the pandemic, and we had a conversation about everyone, all the emails with the headers saying, uncertainty and unprecedented uncertainty, which is kind of crazy because you look back through history. Someone posted the story about the person who lived through, the First World War and the Great Flu and everything that happened before. And I think, well, maybe we're overestimating this a little bit, but your point is very true. And I think we're looking at that right now with, as you said, the movement into money markets, out of banks, with a lot of worries about the bank system. And I was reading the other day something about, someone said, is it going to fall apart? And someone said, well, we're seeing areas where things are breaking already, and we're seeing bits of those. And I think your point about panic is very well taken. And so how do we get to the point where we feel confident that the worst is actually over? What's the balance between the gut feeling of panic and the looking forward long term to forever that gets us through that?
Yeah, so I know that panic is an indication that we are rapidly arriving in the lower left corner of hopelessness and despair. Mm-hmm. And the low is always that moment where hope is lost and no one can envision things getting better. And so I pay a lot of attention to the crowd and the crowd's level of hopelessness. And I think it's a lot easier to assess the mood of the crowd objectively than it is to assess our own mood objectively. And so if you can't look at yourself in an objective way, don't worry, just watch the crowd, because ultimately as an investor, the crowd is going to determine your price anyway. So I wake up many mornings and it's like, okay, where is the crowd today on this map? Are they feeling, extremely confident and generous? Are they feeling despondent? What's the behavior telling us? And the behavior is not only, the companies they're buying, but the kinds of investments they're buying. You know, in my financial economics class, we talk about the full risk and reward curve, from money markets to government bonds to, out to emerging markets and, and SPACs and wild and crazy things. And investors think of that as being a measure of risk and return. I think of that as being a great measure of confidence, because the only time we're going to take those levels of risk is when we're confident. And so I can look every morning to see what's exciting investor interest. And this week it's a lot of money market funds, and that's an indication that the crowd is pessimistic.
Peter, where should people look besides following you on social media, of course? But what are the kind of indicators that you look for? I know I've seen some very quirky, interesting ones that you've shared about.
Such a great question.
Yeah. So if you're interested in the crowd overall, the financial media headlines every day provide a great measure of mood. Remember, they're in the business of mirroring back to us how we feel. So the headlines are notoriously bleak when confidence is low and notoriously optimistic when they're high. Look at the words that people are using. There's all sorts of fun work that's done to cull specific words. And I can look at this on Google Trends. There are companies like AlphaSense that keep track of it in terms of what executives are saying in their press conferences. But the word choices around us are giving us a good feel for our own level of discomfort or confidence. And so I'm fascinated by, what are we Googling today, and what is that expressing about our appetite? So, Kim Ann, you've got a Post-it note.
This is a Post-it from my interview with you from a couple of months ago that says, if we feel it, we search it.
Absolutely. I have some fun charts in my book of all the odd searches we do in the middle of the night when our anxiety is high.
Yeah.
And we have a natural confidence cycle every day.
Yeah.
And the word choices that we search for reflect that heightened level of anxiety.
Do you, for yourself, let's say when you are feeling tension and or low confidence and or uncertainty, do you see now, based on all that you've discovered and researched, are you able to now sort of be an observer of yourself?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I will often just remind myself I'm in me here now mode. I'm in the stress center. And it's a reminder that, oh, this moment will pass.
Yeah.
It's a warning to ignore the stories that I'm telling myself.
Yes.
Either about myself or about others, that these mean stories aren't true.
Yeah.
They're just a function of where I am.
Yeah.
And to just look at them objectively and say, nope, that's me telling myself a lie. Because when I'm more confident, all of those stories disappear.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it feels, I think this is possibly why I was so resonant with your other book too, is it feels really what the spiritual teachers advocate, which is, are you with reality, or are you projecting through a past lens or a future lens? Are you present to what's in front of you? Byron Katie has a powerful book called Loving What Is, where she repeatedly asks you, are you actually in this present moment or not? And that is what, in a sense, this observer that you're advocating, we each have for ourselves and the wider world, seems to be in alignment with. Would you agree with this?
Absolutely. And I think about, remind yourself, if the stories you were telling yourself in those moments were true, wouldn't other people be saying the same thing to you about you? If you thought you were going to be fired, chances are your boss would have told you or given you clues that you're going to be fired, or seek out somebody who can be an objective truth teller in those moments. I'm thinking this is true. Is it really?
Yeah, for sure. So many questions, Michelle. I want to give you a chance to, but I'm just
Well, I wanted to talk actually about, I often talk about when people are feeling overconfident, and maybe that's when they're even just outside the edge of your confidence quadrant. That when people are overconfident, they tend to take bad active risks. Make bets that are way too big. But you talk in the book also about underconfidence being a time when people make bad choices, take risks poorly. Could you talk a little bit more about what's going on in people's mind when they're under or over confident, and why they tend to make bad decisions in those places?
So appreciate, and I know Michelle and Kim, and you know this, but the opposite of confidence is vulnerability. And so when we say we're overconfident, what we're really expressing is that I feel invulnerable, that nothing has the potential to hurt me, to harm me. And so my decision making is going to reflect this sense that I have armor on, that I have, oodles of money that will just replenish, that I have abundance in everything that matters to me. It could be power, it could be money, it could be health. It's all of these ways that I have abundance. And so that abundance is going to lead me to make bad decisions because I'm not thinking that these resources are in fact finite. And inevitably they always are. So at the overconfident level, we have to be very careful not to fall victim to that excessive abundance that we feel and the invulnerability that goes along with it. At the other end, we feel especially vulnerable. We think the things that matter to us are scarce. And so rather than being willing to take risk, we have an inclination to hoard. And I think of hoarding as almost the antithesis to risk taking, because I'm unwilling to put at risk, to risk losing even more than I have. And that hoarding mindset makes us unwilling to take risk, ironically, at a time when we are in a position to take even greater risk than we realize. Again, if I'm feeling vulnerable, I've likely experienced the downsides that go along with falling confidence. And so ironically, we need to take more risk when we feel that it's not prudent to take risk. And we need to take less risk when we believe that we have an immense capacity to take it.
Yeah.
And so I always think we need to go against our gut.
Yeah. You've talked a little bit about it. Really, it's self-awareness that you're talking about, but not everybody's good at self-awareness. For people who hate being introspective and considering things like that, do you have hacks that people can use, whether it's biofeedback or have someone around you, or how do you balance out your tendency to be overconfident or underconfident?
So there are two ways. One, again, you can look at the crowd, but the other thing is to step back and say, on a quiet day, I think of these as creating an overconfident and an underconfident bingo card in your life. If I was overconfident, what are the kinds of choices that I would naturally make? And to come up with a list in your personal life, in your financial life, If you're a business owner, what would it look like in my business if I felt overconfident? And I have some examples in my book that you can draw from. But it's really helpful to have an objective list that captures what you would be doing at extremes in confidence. At lows in confidence, I'd be calling my broker to put everything in cash. I would be, doing all of these different things, and to hold on to those lists. Because inevitably you're going to have those moments again. And I'm not saying all of those things on that list need to happen, but you can begin to think of it almost like a mosaic of tiles that are turning, or a checklist. And so more and more of those things are likely to be checked off. And it's just an objective way to say, oh, I'm underconfident, I'm overconfident. And just to see that list in real time is a way to temper those actions.
So tape them to your computer before you turn it on.
Yeah.
What
Tape them to the bathroom mirror when you're doing your makeup or shaving.
Exactly. So if anybody has questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box. Jasmine, I know you were here before. If you're still here, feel free to ask any question. There's a powerful concept you introduce in the book called the halo effect. I would love for you to talk about that. Oh, you only see Michele now, huh, Jasmine? For crying out loud.
I think that's from before.
Oh, from before. Okay. Thomas has a question. So let me hold on to my question, Peter. Thomas is asking, is it risk taking harder because you can't share with those around you who view negatively when it comes to investing? Thomas, just make sure that's fully articulated. I'm not sure I fully comprehend what you're asking. Peter, does that make sense to you, what Thomas has written?
So, risk taking is often difficult at extremes in sentiment, because to be prudent has you going against the attitude of the crowd. And so at extremes in confidence, you're going to be prudent. You're going to sell rather than buy. And that's likely to be viewed not just negatively, but ridiculed. And certainly we see that in social media. You're a coward, you're a wimp, you don't understand, you're too old. I mean, all of those lines get used over and over. And at the other end, it feels like you're going to be lighting money on fire. That to get in at the lows is, again, ridiculous. It would be laughable to, have bought financial stocks the weekend Lehman Brothers collapsed. And yet, in hindsight, that would have been a really wise thing to do. So, you have to realize that prudence at both extremes in sentiment tend to bring back those lonely moments of, the cafeteria in middle school where you wore the wrong outfit or nobody wants to sit with you. And I've gotten very comfortable with ridicule. I think ridicule is a great objective measure of where the crowd is. Because a overconfident crowd is always strident, always loud.
Powerful. Thomas, thank you for that question. That was a great question to speak about. Halo effect. Talk about that, because I hear often traders complain about how frequently there's commentary online, especially Twitter, of, they call them the furus, the fake gurus out there advocating X, Y, or Z. And then Thomas, we'll get to your second question, but that halo effect and what happens, even the things that are said on Twitter impact people, I suspect is because of the halo effect. So just explain how you describe that, please.
Yeah, we're awash in experts today. From social media to financial television to the financial media at large. And we associate success with brilliance. And so, put a billionaire on TV and we now expect them to be the wisest men in the room, not realizing that many of them were just incredibly lucky. And so, we need to also appreciate that we, on particularly financial media, wheels out certain experts at certain times. Someone like Nouriel Roubini only resonates when confidence is low. Yeah. So I pay a lot of attention to sightings of him in the financial media. And then there are those that are only, absolute bulls that you tend to see at the other extremes. But I think that it's very easy to succumb to all of the pontification that you see in social media and on television. And unfortunately, we don't publish track records. There's nothing in terms of accountability. And so I tend not to pay much attention at all to what the experts have to say. Again, I think price is determined by the crowd. And so I care a whole lot more about the crowd effect than I do the halo effect.
Yeah. Thomas's other question is, how would you describe the mindset of a buy and hold investor in terms of confidence over time?
So the buy and hold investor tends to behave like a passenger on a plane. Once they've made their investment, they naturally move to the lower left, to the lower right-hand corner, where they have no control, but they believe they have certainty. And the value of that group is sort of like passengers on a plane. They'll take a little bit of turbulence, but you also see when they're in panic mode. And it is often the buy and hold investor who is getting out at precisely the wrong moment because they're convinced the plane's going to crash. Or they get in at the very wrong moment because they're convinced the plane is just going to stay airborne forever. Yeah. And so I watch the buy and hold investor because they often make extreme decisions at the extremes in confidence. They cannot take the nose of the plane diving. Yeah. They like everybody else feel a desperate need to get out.
Yeah, for sure. There's another part of the book where you talk about the 5 F's. Would you walk us through those because they're so powerful?
Yeah, so these are the behaviors that naturally go along when we feel powerless and uncertain. And fight and flight get a lot of attention. Mm-hmm. But in fact, they're relatively infrequent responses. Fight requires that we feel empowered, which we often don't when we're in the stress center. It's a desperate act if I'm fighting. And flight requires that we have the skill or ability to leave. More frequently, we're going to experience the freeze response, and the big response that we're prone to is the follow response. And follow is the one that we are terrible at in those moments, because we don't look for credentials. We don't look for the skill set. We just look for somebody who answers the phone, who answers our call, who's resonant. Think about if you've got a pipe that bursts, you're never going to check the credentials of your plumber. All you're looking for is somebody to answer the phone who promises to be there. And that's the nature of our follow response. And so we need to be careful that we don't fall victim to predators, cult leaders, authoritarian figures, because they know that we're easy targets when we're in that stress center. The last response, so I've got fight, flight, freeze, follow. The last one's fuck it. And that is a response that we see a lot. We see it in corporations in terms of sabotage. You could think about it as being the sort of the terrorist response. Terrorism is one of those behaviors that's much more predictable than we think. But the fuck it response is something that low confidence really brings out. And it's a sense that I'm never going to regain certainty and control, but then again, why should you? And so we tend to go after the folks in that process.
Peter, if you recognize that you're one of the people who frequently falls into one of these 4 quadrants, is there anything you can do to become one of the people who regularly lands in a better quadrant? Is there something about people who typically tend to fall in any of those? Because you'll see a crisis where one person's very comfortable with uncertainty and they're going and they're picking up all of the commercial real estate that's down 40%. There's on its way down, and someone else is just becoming very, very, very conservative. What's the difference between those people? Is it malleable? Is it something you can change or not? Or are you just condemned to be in the passenger seat or whichever one you fall into?
No, I don't think you are condemned. And I would say that in many ways, it is our choice to be where we are, particularly the passenger seat. We can blame others for putting us there, or the same thing with the stress center, but ultimately it's our choice to remain there. And that's a hard message to hear and to deliver. And as I share in the book, not everyone has the skills or ability to move out of a box.
Yeah.
But I think that the goal ultimately is a sense of resilience, that no matter where you land, you know what to do to get out in terms of how do I take control of the situation. And one of the things I like about certainty and control is they're both actionable. If somebody's in the stress center, I can ask them, what's one thing you could do to feel more in control? What's one thing you could do to feel more certain about what's ahead? And that inward reflection can be really powerful, because they if forced to think about it, we can always come up with something. And it's not about taking big, bold steps. It's about taking a series of small steps over and over and over. And if you keep track of your movement around the boxes, what you begin to realize is that every time you're in the stress center and have gotten out, you've tended to use the same process. It may have been applied differently, but getting out of the stress center is a skill. And it requires you to head to the launch pad or to ask for help. As I tell my students, asking for help is taking control of the situation. It's not weakness. It's realizing that, okay, if I ask for help, now I have some control.
Yeah. You suggested everybody come up with their own catchphrase, similar to when we all know from childhood, if we accidentally get our shirt caught on fire or a scarf, we're supposed to stop, drop, and roll. And we all have that so baked into our head that, God forbid it happens to somebody, pretty much we all know what to do in that kind of an urgent emergency. And yet you said we really don't have that kind of a catchphrase for ourselves and whatever volatility we face, whether we're a trader or an investor. So do you have your own catchphrase that you've created that's your version of that for when you
I will often use "me here now."
You will.
It just as a me here now. That is a reminder that I know where I am, and to stop and breathe and realize that, okay, you're not feeling confident for a reason.
Yeah.
Step back from that. And again, what can I do to gain control? What can I do to create certainty in this moment?
Yes. So I don't know that people can see it in it very well as backwards, but I just wanted to show the map here, even though it's reversed.
I had exactly the same thought, only it's not showing up on mine.
It's not just for people.
It's not showing up for me, but
this is the low certainty, low confidence box. And over here is where we will always be usually moving on this. And this, of course, is high certainty and high confidence. And ultimately, what Peter's book is explaining for all of us is that we are constantly moving within these four boxes. And just by knowing, oh, this is where I am right now, if you're feeling like everything is going to hell in a handbasket, you can't stay there forever. And I just think it's just so profound for people to be able to self-identify. That gives them a sense of control as well, being able to see, where am I right now in these four quadrants? It just makes me feel less powerless.
Yeah, and it's not, I mean, so often we talk about not having confidence as weakness or there's a problem. And the reality is life moves us around, and just being able to go, oh, I still fondly remember a student. She walked into class one day and she's, "Professor," she was late for class. She says, "I'm in the lower left-hand corner. I had a fight with my roommate last night. I overslept this morning. I have an organic chemistry test this afternoon." And she's smiling. And it's like, okay, I'll bite. Why the smile? And she said, because I know that when the test is done, I will be moving out of the lower left-hand box. But to just go, oh, lower left-hand box today. Yep, I feel it. Right. Yeah. But it's not forever.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks.
So you can push off some decisions that, if there's an important decision you have to make, and that you're in a bad place, you can wait. So, my blood pressure is low. I wait till I'm not hangry anymore. And that will get me into a different quadrant.
Exactly. Just that student, the story about that student, she still has all of those things about to take place, but she was able to smile because she was able to sort of observe her own self in that moment. And that gave her that relief. Like, it's just a little bit of space between you and the panic that can change everything.
Yeah, one of the most powerful moments for me with my students is I ask them to map their senior year of high school. So this is college freshmen map the year. And, prom and spring break end up in the upper right-hand corner, but a lot of senior year is spent in the lower left-hand corner, waiting for applications, to hear from colleges, all of the stress of the college application process. And I have my students map, and then to share the maps with each other. And the conversation quickly turns to, wow, I thought I was the only one who felt this way. I thought, and suddenly there's this shared awareness that it's not weakness. It's not laziness. It's not all of these things that you've told yourselves. It was that we all feel powerless and uncertain at different points in our lives. And if we can just look at them objectively, we can destigmatize them to ourselves with others and just say, yep, I'm in the lower left-hand corner. And it's not weakness. It's just, this is where I feel that I am today.
Yeah. Would you also agree that it's not even a lack of willpower? Because I feel sometimes people confuse willpowers and they will get mad at themselves, especially there's, a bit of this hustle mentality being advocated by a couple of gurus out there who are like, you just have to push through. And yet there's times when I feel when people are in that lower left-hand quadrant, they don't have what one would say is the willpower to push through. Would you just speak to that?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One thing is we spend a lot of time when we're in the lower left-hand corner focused on how did we get there? Mm-hmm. And so our mindset is looking backwards. And one of the lessons that I learned from emergency room doctors is they really don't care how you got there. And so their mindset isn't about what caused it as much as you are here now. And so I think when we're in the lower left-hand corner, we need to stop attributing and blaming ourselves, others, and be focused on, okay, I'm here.
Yeah.
And there is I think people are entitled to have moments of wallowing, mm-hmm. that to say, yes, this is a crappy place to be.
Yes. Yes.
But then it turns not into this heroic, leaping out of there, but recognizing that this is now the beginning of a journey out of it. And in mythology, we call it the hero's journey, to realize that, there's steps forward and steps backwards, that it's a process of recovery. When I talk to folks in the medical community, there's curing a patient and healing a patient. Mm. And when we're in the lower left-hand corner, it's the healing process that we need. It's the recovering of certainty and control in our lives. And so it would behoove us to be a little nicer to ourselves in realizing that healing takes time.
Yeah. I'm a huge advocate of practicing self-empathy, nonviolent communications. Marshall Rosenberg taught me the importance of self-empathy. And if we don't practice that, it's really hard for us to have empathy for anybody else. But I think that's ultimately, what you're suggesting, like that sense of healing can only come if we're able to just be with the fact that we're demoralized or in that lower left-hand quadrant.
Yeah.
So powerful. I have a couple of quotes here. Michele, did you want to go first before I read any quotes?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Sure. The greatest need wasn't repairing planes, but in restoring trust. That was on page 109 about when confidence is low. We still at that point with the different airlines that had crashed, they were focused on repairing the planes. And it's funny because we just talked about healing, right? So in a sense, that's what needed to heal at that time when these plane crashes were happening. The companies focused on, let's show them how we've done these repairs, when what really they needed was healing the trust again. Let's talk about the importance of that when it comes to a person who perhaps has found himself in that lower left-hand quadrant, just even by way of themselves, never mind organizations.
Yeah, so this sense of, in the case of Boeing, they were focused on the problem and not the feelings arising from the problem. And ultimately, it's all about the feelings. And when we feel vulnerable, it's about eliminating those feelings of powerlessness and uncertainty. Mm. And to think about it in those terms, what do you need to feel more empowered? What do you need to feel more certain? because that's the elimination of vulnerability. And we don't think of crises or problems often in those terms. But I think it's very powerful to reframe problems in a sense of scarcity and vulnerability, because it then clearly focuses you on what's the real matter at heart. To your point, is it trust? Is it health? Is it power? Is it money? What's creating those feelings of vulnerability? Because until you heal those, until you address them, you're not going to have your confidence restored.
Yeah. We're talking to Peter Atwater. He is the author of the extraordinary book called The Confidence Map. If you're a trader or an investor or just any sort of business leader, it's a must read. It just came out a couple of months ago. I had Peter on my podcast a couple of months ago when it first came out. I can't get enough of it. I can't express how important it is for you to understand the confidence spectrum, because you are always on it. And for business leaders, your customers, your clients, your colleagues, your employees are always on it. And understanding it is going to change how you deal with them, how you deal with yourself, how you deal with your investing and or trading account. Michele, I'll pause and see whether there anything else that you had. We'll probably wrap it up in a few minutes, but
yeah, I think really just the final thing that really comes through listening to Peter's last comments is that, a lot of traders, I mean, they're really good at math. I mean, I remember in the early 90s when technical trading was starting to be a thing, and there's just so much emphasis on the quantitative side of trading and investing, and this confidence in the numbers and the market reaching the appropriate price. And I think that this conversation really demonstrates how important it is to understand emotions, that emotions contribute to those numbers that traditionally we were taught to think are the numbers. So I just wanted to emphasize and underscore that point, because it's part of why the confidence map is so important. So thank you, Peter, for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you,
much,
Michele.
Lord. Before we close up, if there's any other questions with our handful of people here, please feel free to put them in the chat box as soon as possible so we can ask Peter the question before we close this up. I'm just looking here because I had one other question I definitely wanted to ask you. Just this a vulnerability first mindset. What would that look like for a trader or an investor?
So to think about when confidence is falling, when your confidence has fallen, we tend to look at the money loss, the thing that's broken, the accident itself, as opposed to pausing for a second to say, what's driving my feelings really? What's the vulnerability that I'm really worried about? And to be very precise about that, because if I can focus on the vulnerability, then I'm likely to make a wiser decision. The example I use in the book, the head of Johnson & Johnson pulling all of the containers of Tylenol from the shelves, because had they left any on the shelf, the vulnerability would have stayed in place. The decision to ground every plane on 9/11, it may seem excessive, but if you think about the feelings aspect of both of those moments, it's brilliant. You've eliminated all vulnerability. And I think that in those moments of powerlessness and uncertainty, thinking about how do I put a floor on this? What is the vulnerability that I want to stop?
Yeah. So powerful because it'll just instantly put that word you just used, a floor beneath you.
Exactly.
And you can't, when you feel like you're drowning, that is what you need. You need oxygen as much as you need that sense of something that is holding you up. So powerful. Peter, I can't. I wish I had even more ways to get this book out there because I feel it will change people's lives, change their trading, change their investing, change how they deal with the volatility and uncertainty that our world is going to always give us. So thank you for this book.
Thank you, Command. And I'm going to give another shout out to Michele because I think Michelle's work in risk management is very complementary. I was flattered that you included the confidence map in your book, but I can't emphasize enough, Michele, the work that you do, and I'm flattered that you're part of this conversation today.
Thank you. And I couldn't be happier. And Kim, I'm so glad that you brought us back together again, and you've made a huge contribution to this conversation as well.
It's my pleasure, and I just feel it's tools. You guys are both providing tools that people can pull right out of your books and apply to how they live, how they work, and it's everything. That's all anybody needs are just the right tools. So thank you both for the tools you've given us all.
Thank you for the opportunity, Kim Ann. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, and thanks to everyone tuning in.
My
Absolutely.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for watching. Thomas, thank you for your question. And Jasmine, thank you too for helping us with the technology. Yes, I can't wait, Jasmine, to hear what you think of their books. Wait till you read them. You're going to be so impressed.